and start. So we've discussed the beginnings of the French Revolution, the causes, how it started. We've discussed the influence of the American Revolution and also the rise of Napoleon and some of the effects of this revolutionary time period on things like the end of slavery and the revolutions in Latin America. Finally, we're going to talk about how the end of the era of Napoleon and what happened to Europe after Napoleon. So here we can see again the Napoleonic Empire, Napoleon's big empire throughout Europe. See all this territory claimed by Napoleon, conquered, allied with, or they were like, um, subject states of Napoleon's empire. So he's been very successful in conquering lots of different parts of Europe and even territories of overseas, like in Africa and in the Middle East and in the Americas. So he's a very strong, big, powerful empire. Now he gets very confident now, and there was there's another place he wants to go conquer, and he believes he'll have enough soldiers and enough um, military aptitude to do it. So what happened to him? He assembles one of the largest armies in the history of the world, almost 700,000 soldiers, to go and invade Russia. It's the next place he wants. So he um, goes to fight this war with Russia, but Russia has a strategy that he did not anticipate. The Imperial Army just continues to retreat from Napoleon and his army. The Russian army just keeps running and running and running. That may not sound too innovative, but what they also did was burn and destroy every village along the way as they retreated. Why do this, you might ask? Why would you do that to your own country, your own people, your own villages? Because at the time, um, Napoleon's army and a lot of armies, they couldn't bring enough supplies to to feed and clothe and shelter all the armies that they're bringing, all the soldiers. There just wasn't enough supplies. There'd be, miles of uh, carts pulled by thousands of animals, and there's just too much. You couldn't do it. So they would have to find food and shelter as they traveled, as they marched inward. And the Russians have destroyed all of those supplies, all of that shelter. So there's nothing left for Napoleon. And his armies begin to lose hope, right? They don't have food, they don't have shelter, they're running out very quickly, and it becomes very difficult for them. They don't give up just yet, though. They keep marching into Russia until they get to the capital of Russia called Moscow, right? Still the capital today. And Moscow's burned also. This huge imperial city is burned by the Russians and by Napoleon, right? And they finally meet. They have all these little skirmishes along the way, but there's the Battle of Moscow where they meet and they fight. And Napoleon doesn't actually lose, but he doesn't win, and he sees that he is probably not going to win. And his soldiers keep leaving. They desert. They're starving. He has all these wounded soldiers. So eventually, he decides, he is done. At that point, he just has to turn around and go back to France. And you can see um, the massive army at the beginning as they go further and further into Russia. They lose more and more soldiers. A 100,000 or so left by the time they fight the Battle of Moscow. And then the return journey, they lose more and more to the cold, to the starvation, and a lot to just soldiers giving up and leaving. Around 10,000 soldiers by the time Napoleon gets back. So his enemies, and he has made quite a few enemies at this point, see that he is weak, right? All the 700,000 soldiers down to just 10,000. They see their opportunity to strike. So Russia, Prussia, and Austria, they come together and form an alliance, and they go and defeat Napoleon, right? And at this time, if you're a powerful leader like Napoleon, you get special privileges. You don't have to go to jail necessarily. Or they don't cut off your head. He got to go to this private little island called Elba. He was exiled there, and that's where he was supposed to stay for the rest of his life until he died, just so he would be, stay out of trouble, basically. However, he escaped Elba. It was a little maybe too cushy for him, a little too easy of going, so he is able to escape fairly easily. Return to France for about 100 days, becomes a ruler again, then gathers his big army, but is defeated by an even larger alliance, this time with the English, who take a lot of the credit for the victory. But yeah, this is the Battle of Waterloo, to be Napoleon's downfall. And he is exiled again, this time a lot, not Elba up here, but all the way down around Africa to the island of St. Helena, 1,000 miles, thousands of miles away from France. He dies at age 51 on the island. Now Napoleon's gone, so these European rulers and authorities in Europe are like, how are we going to put Europe back together? And these rulers, of course, come a lot from the nobility and the monarchies, and they're like, well, let's just put it back the way it was, right? How was it before Napoleon? There were mostly monarchs, mostly kings and queens in charge, and that's the way these conservative leaders want to go back to. But then there's this other voice, the liberal voice, right? This is the revolutionary kind of voice, the idea that there needs to be more democracy. The people need to have a say. It shouldn't just be these nobility and the top of society, the kings having all the power. There needs to be some more democracy and some more natural rights being protected. However, that group doesn't really have a say in the Congress. The conservative, the traditional monarchist have most of the power, and guess who wins? Yeah, Europe goes back to these kingdoms: Kingdom of France, Kingdom of Spain, United Kingdom, Empire, right? Kingdom of Prussia, Kingdom of Sicily. All these kingdoms are reestablished. Kings are put back in place. France had lost their king, so they get a new one. The old king's cousin, and so the main powers in Europe after this are Prussia, Russia, Britain, France, and Austria. That's Prussia, Russia, Britain, France, Austria. These big, powerful countries, and they're called the Concert of Europe. These powerful countries who want to maintain the same kind of order that's always been there, with very little changes, not a lot of democracy, not a lot of these liberal ideas getting in, and they want to make sure those ideas are not brought up again. No more revolutions in Europe, right? They're like, that's one of their goals. Because they saw the French Revolution and all the craziness that happened, all the kicking out of the nobility, killing the king, and these big wars throughout Europe by Napoleon. They're like, no more of that. So they do away, remember, the liberal ideas Napoleon spread with the Napoleonic Code and the ideas of nationalism. All those ideas are kind of thrown out the window, right? Because the Germans had started to think of themselves as one country, same with the Italians, but here you can see These guys are definitely not united together. There's dozens of countries in there. Italy definitely not united together yet. So those principles don't win either. And here we have Europe after Napoleon. That's the way it'll stay for a little while until more revolutions, more changes, more wars, which we will talk about later.